She was a woman covered in hair, with a strange face that made her look almost like an ape. P.T. Barnum declared her the ugliest woman I've ever seen, and he was actually quite fond of her. She was born in the Sinaloa district of Mexico in 1834 to a woman that did not want her. Examined by a number of medical authorities, some of whom declared she was a distinct species or the product of a woman getting pregnant by an orangutan, a doctor named Neeland examined her and declared that she was quite human. Another doctor backed him up, stating that she was only a deformed Mexican Indian woman, unquote. Julia was sold like a slave to a carnival exhibitor named Theodore Lent, a man who would shape the way of life Julia Pastrana would know until the end of her days. He taught her to sing and dance, and she learned 3 different languages as well as how to play guitar. Her weird, keening, warbling voice was thought to be very beautiful and strange by those that heard it, and the audience was often astounded to realize the beautiful Spanish songs were coming from a woman with such a shocking, ape-like appearance. Charles Darwin, the creator of the theory of evolution, mentions Julia in his book Origin of the Species, where he is particularly concerned that Julia had a double row of teeth, a condition called gingival hypoplasia. And, Darwin wrote, Julia Pastrana, a Spanish dancer, was a remarkably fine woman, but she had a thick masculine beard and a hairy forehead. She was photographed, and her stuffed skin was exhibited as a show. But what concerns us is that she had in both the upper and lower jaw an irregular double set of teeth, one row being placed within the other, of which Dr. Perlin took a cast. From the redundancy of the teeth, her mouth projected, and her face had a gorilla-like appearance. Lent took Julia on a tour of Europe. He also decided that they should get married. Most think this was because he feared any other showman wooing her away from him. Frederick Drimmer tells us that when close friends asked Julia if she thought Lent was just exploiting her, she refused to believe it. Heartbreakingly, she said, "He loves me for me." She may have really believed this, or deep down she may have known better. Sometimes people desperate for love and affection will believe all sorts of lies, take all sorts of bad treatment just so they can feel that someone cares for them. It was while they were touring Russia that Julia became pregnant. At first she was overjoyed, thinking that the baby surely would not have the same deformities as she suffered with. Alas, it was not to be a happy ending for poor Julia Pastrana. The baby came out covered in hair, looking the exact picture of the mother. A few days later, the baby died. Within 5 days of this, Julia also succumbed from complications involved in the birth. Some wondered if, in fact, she hadn't merely died of a broken heart. Mr. Lent, now seeing that he was cheated by death out of his primary source of income, devised a plan that could continue the shows, in a bizarre way. A Dr. Sokolov, an expert from Moscow in embalming bodies, was brought in. Under his careful work, the bodies of Julia Pastrana and her child were carefully preserved, turned into mummies, that is, and put in a glass case especially designed by Lent. He then continued to tour with this morbid, strange exhibit, urging audiences to flock to see the monster and her baby. When Barnum saw it, he reportedly later said of Lent, "I was certain as I saw it of the presence of at least one monster." Meaning, of course, that Lent was the real freak, the thing that should be on display and stared at. A weird woman claiming to be Julia's sister came forward, and Lent soon took her on as part of the show. Her claim to be related to Julia was later called into doubt. For his part, Lent seems to have paid for his cruelty and callousness toward his late wife with his life. It is said he went slowly mad, dying in a Russian mental asylum, a place that was probably unsanitary and grim, as such mental homes were in those long-ago days. The remains of Julia and her infant son, his body was perched almost like a parrot on a little ledge or stoop next to hers in their dual-glass coffin, soon changed hands, becoming a kind of touring carnival wonder. It was seen in America as late as the 1970s, but soon made its way back to Europe, where a planned tour of it in Norway led to public disapproval and shaming. Times were far, far different then than they had been in the mid to late 1800s, and society had become more sensitive to the plight of people like Julia. Much like the famous Eva Peron, whom Madonna portrayed in the movie Evita in 1996, Julia's remains had a strange journey to make, finally ending up in a scientific collection in Oslo. When vandals broke into the warehouse, they slashed the corpse of the infant. It was then badly damaged by mice. As horrible as this is, the result was that the Oslo University Department of Anatomy required a special permit for researchers to view the remains. Finally, after a decision by the authorities and the Norwegian government, it was decided in 2012 that Julia should be taken back to her place of birth for proper, respectful burial. Finally, on February 12, 2013, Julia Pastrana was laid to rest after a large Catholic funeral in the town of Sinua de Leva, near the place of her birth. So ended the long, troubled journey of Julia Pastrana.